Welcome to another Telltale Books video. I'm Greg, and I'm going to continue a series that I pretty much just started about Sprague de Camp, reading everything I can get my hands on, published by Sprague de Camp in order of publication. De Camp is one of the early science fiction writers, having sold his first story in the 30s, published in 1937. He was born in 1907 on November 27th, which is, I'm close to that date as I shoot this. And he died November 6th in the year 2000. So he's been gone for a while. He was born in New York City. And I'm here to talk about his second published story titled Hyperpilosity. Hyperpilosity was published in Astounding Science Fiction in April of 1938. The story, it's his second story according to my bibliography. And if you know what the retro Hugos are, that's where in current times they went back and did voting on Hugo Awards as if, because the Hugo Awards didn't really get started until, what was it, 1953, 1954, something like that. And so there were a lot of years of world science fiction conventions. The first one was in 1939. A lot of years where there were no Hugo Awards. And a lot of those years are years that a lot of us consider to be some of the very, very best years of science fiction, producing some of the very, very best and most memorable and most talked about stories. So they did these retro Hugos to go back and award these stories that had been missed. There weren't any awards before the Hugo Awards were started in the early 1950s. There weren't any awards for science fiction. So a lot of the great works that were published, Asimov's Foundation stories and Asimov's robot stories and Simax City stories and most of Heinlein's Pass Through Tomorrow stories. A lot of the best A.E. Van Vogt stories were published at a time when there weren't any awards. And so these great classic stories never won any kind of award. Now, you could argue a lot about whether or not we really should even do awards. There are a lot of problems with awarding stories, especially lately with people trying to manipulate the Hugo Awards for their own ends, which is sad because ultimately, if a story doesn't win an award, does that really mean it's a bad story? No, it just means not enough of the people voting for the award read that story. Maybe it was published in a lesser known magazine or something. There's all kinds of reasons why a story might not get an award. But anyway, these retro Hugo Awards, they went back to the 1939 very first World Science Fiction Convention, which I believe was in Philadelphia, and did Hugo Awards for the best stories published in 1938, because that's the way the Hugo Awards work. The 1939 Hugo Awards would have been, well, to state it differently, the 2024 Hugo Awards are awarded to stories published in 2023. Alternatively, what is titled the 2024 Nebula Award will be awarded next year at the 2025 Nebula Awards ceremony for stories published in 2024. Confusing, I know. So 1939 Retro Hugo Awards, Hyperpilosity was one of the finalists, not the winner, but a finalist for best short story. And it is just a short story. It's not a long one. Okay. Now, Sprague de Camp I've seen a lot of videos that are just ripping El Sprague de Camp a new one. And the L stands for lion, by the way. Everybody's just ripping him a new one for the way that he and Lynn Carter changed Robert E. Howard's Conan stories back in the 1960s, 1970s, and how for a long time those bastardized stories were the only Conan stories that were put into print. Well, so DeCamp is getting a lot of people calling him a bad writer. Maybe he made some poor decisions regarding Conan, but he's not a bad writer. And that is why I wanted to go back and do this DeCamp series, is try and create a basis for being able to say that and being able to prove, maybe DeCamp isn't the very best science fiction writer ever, but he did a lot of good things. So his second published story is Hyperpilosity. It did get hit the finalist group, like 5 stories in the finalists for the 1939 Retro Hugo. And what is it about? I'm finally getting there. Sorry. In hyperpelosity, there's a virus going around, makes people sick, typical flu-like symptoms. And then when they start getting over it, they start growing more hair all over their body and thick and long, like fur. Everybody who gets this virus has this thing happen where they start growing a lot of hair and they start looking like animals, like, you know, dogs or cats or apes. And this is happening to everybody. I mean, not all at once, because not everybody gets the virus at once, but as the virus does continue to spread, people get this. And so everybody ends up having hair everywhere, having basically fur all over their bodies, women too. The story is a science fiction comedy. As a comedy, it really, it, people might have been belly laughing at this in 1938. Today, you're going to go, well, okay, but it's not that funny. You're not going to be busting up laughing over this. The humor is kind of light and flat. And there are a couple of parts in this that are mildly racist. 1938, okay? Some people didn't see a problem with talking about other people in disparaging terms. You still had yellow peril stories being written in the 1930s. Um, we've come a long way since then. We don't tolerate that. So if that bothers you, this is not a story for you. It's mild. It's not, it's not like this is a story making some kind of racist point, but there is a little bit. So if you take into account that it was published in 1938 and forgive it for being a product of its time, it's a pretty good story. Not a great story, not even among 1938 stories. I don't think it's a great story. I don't think I would have given this one a finalist. And the Retro Heroes were voted on in, I believe, the 20 teens. They're more recent. So at that time when Retro Hugos were being handed out, I don't think I would have even put this in the finalist category. I think there's got to be better stories than this published in 1938, and I know there are. Who Goes There was 1938. Okay. Um, Lots of other stories that could have been chosen as a finalist by almost current day voters than Hyperpelosity. So I'm not proving my point of how good a writer Sprague de Camp is with Hyperpilosity. It's just not there. And I cannot recommend this story. I would say skip it. I read the story. Um, it's available in, of course, Astounding Science Fiction for April 1938, which is online as a PDF still. If you can get a hold of a copy of the best of Sprague de Camp, I've had this for a long time. I've noticed some other booktubers picking up copies and reading this. If you can get a hold of a copy of this book, and this is the paperback, and this isn't even the first edition paperback. There's an earlier edition than this one. And it was published in hardcover by the Science Fiction Book Club, which I have around here somewhere, but I couldn't find it in time to show it for this video. So just trust me that I have it in more than one book, but you can find it in books. It's just, you probably don't want to. Cannot recommend. So Sprague de Camp is, well, he struck out on this story. His very first story, I thought, was overall very good, but kind of dated. And so far, both the stories by Sprague de Camp are intended to be humorous, but the humor, you're not going to be sitting on your couch laughing at these stories. They're not that funny. They're just kind of funny, you know. So we're going to keep going forward. I know he has some good stories. I've already done a couple of them. The Gnarly Man and the Blue Giraffe, I've already done videos of, but those are yet to come. The Gnarly Man is number 11, published in 1939. We are still in 1938. With his third story is going to be my next story. Another one published in Astounding. It's titled The Command. Never read this one. I'm going to see how good it is. And that one, by the way, is also in the best of Sprague de Camp, according to my notes. But I have the October 1938 Astounding. So anyway, have you ever read Hyperpilosity? What did you think? Do you think I'm way off saying that this is not that great a story and that you shouldn't bother reading it today? Or did you think it had some redeeming qualities? Put it in the comment section of the video. I'd love to hear that. Love to hear those other perspectives on the story. And I hope you'll hit a like on this video, subscribe to our channel, and come on back for more Sprague de Camp and other writers' stories, magazines that I'm talking about here on Telltale Books.